Yeah.
We were breaking too. That's where that's the time when I started breaking. So it's super important, right? Because
Yeah.
I was able to learn about hip hop, and that's how I became integrated and a member of hip hop.
And even Dr. Ru, what's good?
Yo, man, everything's good, man. Thank you for
Everything's
having me.
blessed. Everything's blessed. Thank you for coming through. Thanks for coming through. So you've been a part of our virtual series. You've been a part of our series in person, Aspire to Inspire. You've seen us at Peach. You've seen us on Zoom. You've seen us on IG. You've been a part of the Jane Finch Mall campaign. You've been a part of the Artworks Teal campaign. And we're transitioning to make it about a speaker series where we get a chance to speak to the artists and ask those questions that people want to know but they don't know. So you go by a lot of AKAs. There's Ruben Esguerra, there's Dr. Ru, and the title Doctor is not an easy title. How did you acquire the title Dr. Ru?
It's because I did a master's in ethnomusicology at York University.
What is it?
Ethnomusicology.
Ethnomusicology. What is that joint about?
It's basically anthropology, but through music. So you're studying culture through the lens of music.
Studying culture through the lens of music. Now, when you say culture, what kind of culture?
Culture in general. You can study something specific, or you can, study multiple. Like the way I guess music is important and integral to different cultures and how it's used and
Right.
and the instruments and the different genres and all that stuff, like the history behind it.
And you went to study at York University.
Yeah, I did an undergrad there in music,
Yeah.
and then a master's in ethnomusicology, and then I continued to my PhD in the same field. So that's why the doctor. Even though I didn't graduate.
Yeah.
I did all my coursework, and I have what's called a PhD ABD. ABD stands for.
Man, you connected to a PhD, you gold. And yesterday's price is not today's price. You know, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a nickname that was given to me. It wasn't something that I chose,
Right,
just because of that reason. But it came out of the San Romano way, work that I was doing, the community work. That's what the youth started calling me.
Yeah.
And but to me it was more like, for me it's important to have those accolades, but it's not something that I mention that often. For me, it's also important to get the respect of your community. So that's why I feel the name, was given to me.
So you studied at York University, but did you later on went to teach at York University as well?
I taught at York for over 10 years while I was doing the master's and the PhD.
So while you were studying, you were also so you were a teacher while you were a student? So you were giving yourself A's on the low ski? Hey, yo, I know you're correcting the course at 5 o'clock. I'm gonna meet you. Okay, so you were studying while teaching. While at this time, were you also a family man too, or were?
Yeah. I had my first daughter, Alexa, in 2006, while I was completing my master's.
Jesus Christ! How did you manage and balance all of these core responsibilities?
Oh man, just motivation, being inspired all the time, having a purpose, having a goal. That just made me be focused, and be able to figure things out and be productive and just follow those goals that I set for myself.
What would you say was your motivation, or how did you identify with your purpose or find it?
I just loved what I was doing at the time. I was already living full time from music.
Right.
I was actually I was able to pay off my university my university fees through doing gigs.
Bro, I'm glad you said it, because I wanted to get into it. Because like you guys heard the man said, studying while teaching.
While doing gigs.
While doing gigs. Yeah. Raising his daughter. And then you paid off your school fees with the gigs. Now, one thing artists like myself and many artists do struggle with, we're quick to take the money from a check. Like, my first check from music was you. You gave me a check for $20, and I held it in the air, and I'm like, yeah. Then I took it out, and I went to Pizza, and then that was it. But that let me know, though, that, in that moment, I'm there, yo, this 20, because my mom, at that point, told me, you will never make money from music. So just what that signified for me was, this 20 is going to turn into 20,000, and this, that, and the third, which I've been able to receive that from my music over the course of a period of time, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
not only are we artists, but we are artivists, like artists who are doing activist work. And for me, like, I don't know, like, you guys kind of launched me into it, and at one point we'll expose the like how like that bridge, but we're gonna focus on you. But for you, like, how did you become that artist educator and that artist activist essentially?
Damn, that's a like a question that I guess guys has to take me back to when I was a kid growing
Right.
up. The reasons why I came to Canada, I came as a political refugee with my parents. They were doing arts education work and human rights work at a time where whole political movements were being disappeared.
Damn.
Because they were fighting for human rights in Colombia.
Right.
So it was at a point in the political history of Colombia where it was at its peak in terms of violence against human rights activists.
And you were watching all of that.
Well, yeah, and we had to leave because my parents were both doing activism, and a lot of their colleagues were being basically disappeared.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oof.
So that's why we had to come to Toronto. So
how old were you when you came here?
8.
Okay.
So at that age, I had to understand the reason why we came. So
right.
you become aware, you become politically conscious of so like you at a young age,
Mm-hmm.
right? You became conscious because of your the circumstances.
Yeah. So it's kind of like life wakes you up and say, hey, it's not that, if you don't do this, things are not going to go right.
You grow up and you understand all those political issues, you know. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we came, we were also, you know, integrated into a community of Colombians that had come as a for the same reasons, right?
Right.
And it was in these places where like there was a lot of support for, you know, international human rights events and stuff like that. Like these were activists, right? Mm-hmm. That were working at the time and had a network of causes they would support. Yeah. So I grew up in that context because my parents continued their activism, right?
So like, what was it like being raised around activist parents? Like, what did they necessarily teach you to be an activist, or did they just do their thing? Like, did you feel like how was that experience being raised by parents who are deep into activism?
Oh man, they were always trying to like show me, you know, I guess the truth and the reality about the situation of just working people in the world, the influence of media, of corporations, the imbalance between different classes, and why understanding those things. So they took every opportunity to teach me, right?
Right.
And I couldn't watch like G.I. Joe and stuff like that.
So was it through books too, or was it mostly just through verbal communication?
Everything, you know, every
everything
film, was a teaching moment, but it was
it.
mostly because of the actual circumstances. Like we had to come here
for
that reason, right? So it's like they had to explain a lot of stuff.
And now as a parent who's obviously, your kids are not living the same life. They don't have the same experience that you had as a child. I'm sure they may have their own struggles, but it's not good. You've eliminated what you've went through so they don't experience the same. As a parent, do you feel like it's important to make every moment a teachable moment? Do you let loose? How do you keep it all balanced?
Yeah, it's a good one. You know, you try to use every moment too, and kind of like, but you know, with kids it's hard because you don't want to take up their space. You don't want to also.
God, that was like back in your time. Like things are different now, bro.
Yeah, you gotta, you know.
Like I'm born here. Probably, right? That's how they see it.
Yeah, you gotta basically learn from them how to communicate with them. You know what I mean?
But I think that's what makes you a good performer, though. When you learn how to like transpire communication with adults, and would you say like that's what aids us on stage as well, like learning how to talk to our kids. So then you learn how to deal with every crowd. It could be a heckler or whoever, but you just know how to talk to that person to get them to just, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's communication. You know,
right.
Like really understanding what you know, how to actually engage everybody who you speak to. So and I think that's similar to performance, right? To an audience, engaging to an audience. Yeah.
Now, back on the performance step, like I said before, a lot of artists struggle with the concept of financial literacy. A lot of artists are maybe in school doing a job, like they're just in a very trickling financial space, but they just believe, hey, my art's gonna blow up, come with $1 million, and life is just gonna change for me. Not knowing that many artists have followed the same path and have felt, flat on their face. For you, like, how did you acquire the? Not saying you're a millionaire, of course, but how did you acquire the financial literacy knowledge to be able to even do that while a lot of people are still deep in debt and have next to no idea when that's gonna happen?
Yeah, man. It was just learning by example. My parents they basically like taught me that how to be able to live within your means. Still do, because they were very supportive when it came to me deciding to do music.
Right.
They were always very supportive, but what allowed me to be able to do it was because I knew that I had to be good at what I did. So like, number one thing is to practice your skills.
Right.
And then to live within the means that those skills provide you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's basically that concept.
No, because when I first met you, what was the first phone you had?
I had a flip phone for the longest time. You guys made fun of me.
Bro, I'm there like, yo, dog, what is that, V? Like every time I see them, I'm there like, yo, and then I remember then you copped the iPhone after we hassled you for them few months.
Yeah, and I didn't want to, bro.
It's all good though, because later on I lost my iPhone and I asked Ruben for the phone. I'm like, yo, bro, let me get that trap phone I was insulting you about, because I don't have a phone now. You see how karma works? But yeah, man. But so essentially, like, an artist educator, a community worker, a father. These are not easy titles to acquire, and a lot of the times you've throughout every album. And 2 of them are Juno nominated. I might say congratulations on that. I happen to be on one of them, so I guess I'm a Juno nominee technically as well. I'm claiming that. But yeah, like between those 3 like albums and all of these things, like a lot of the time you've managed to dedicate something to community artists, something to parents, something to just people living in that that struggle. Like, how do you, like, for you, like what makes you keep reminding people that are experiencing burnout from community or experiencing burnout from being a good person? How do you tell them, like, yo, keep going? Like, for you, like, what is that motivation to check in on them in every album?
Yeah, well, for me, it's so natural because it's where I come from. I come from that context, right? The community building context. Even the neighborhood where I'm from originally in Colombia, the way that it was founded, it was pretty crazy. Like, it was land that wasn't being used.
Right.
It was behind a hospital.
Damn.
And then at that time there was a huge war that displaced people all over. Like, they had to lot of people
gentrification from that you were experiencing gentrification in your.
No, it wasn't that. It was that a lot of people, because of the war, were being displaced. They had to leave their land. A lot of indigenous people, peasants, Afro-Colombians from the coastal regions. Because there's in Colombia there's a huge population of black people.
Right.
So all of that came to the cities, right? So my grandmother and my auntie were some of those original organizers, and what they did was that they set up tents, and then ran in and went inside the land that wasn't being used at all, right, behind this hospital in the center of the main capital city, and they built their tents. And that's how they were able to intercept a water pipe from the hospital and have access to water. And they had to do it. Then the mayor sent in the police. There was armed confrontation. My grandmother had to go up in arms. And my dad was a little kid. Yeah, all of that is actually in I did a little mini documentary on this album.
Were you exposed all these?
Part 1 talks about that neighborhood, and you see there happened to be French reporters there at the time, and they caught it all on film.
Damn.
The people carrying in the tents like that.
So I guess, like, Jane and Finch is not that far off from.
That's where I come from. I grew up in basically community building through culture, through the arts. Out of that neighborhood, a lot of artists came out of that neighborhood in Colombia, including my cousin, who came to Canada before me, and he was also nominated for a Juno Award in '95, and I started playing with his band, and yeah.
So, like, when you came to Canada when you were 8, what was the first community you resided in? Do you remember?
as soon as I landed, we lived by actually close to here, Davenport and Dufferin, and
Okay.
Regal, in front of Regal Road School.
Okay.
Then we moved to like Kiel and Weston area,
Right.
and that's where like kind of my teenage years, a lot of getting in trouble and stuff like that.
You got in trouble before. It seemed like you were
Yeah,
living in
man. There was a huge around that time, like the whole thing with gangs from Latin America was huge, but a lot of
Right.
people got deported
Right.
around that time. So I grew up in like in the 90s in that time where there was a lot of like.
So you felt like at one point in time you indulged in a bit of that street life too.
I think it's something every teenager kind of has to go through, and it was kind of like my gateway to becoming street smart, to understanding dynamics between like the street politics and that whole thing. Like you have to grow up knowing that, right?
Right.
Or else you're gonna be sheltered from a lot of things. Also it had to do a lot with identity too, because it was gangs that were forming that were like
crews. They
about
formed
Latin pride, and it was
Right.
basically kids who came, they faced discrimination, so they all got together and they had a sense of family.
Yeah.
So understanding that was important for your whole your own development
Your whole
of identity,
existence.
you know. And at that time we were listening to 90s hip hop, dance hall was huge, so you're listening to the music, you're learning about hip hop and the culture. Like we were breaking too. That's where that's the time when I started breaking. So it's super important, right? Because I was able to learn about hip hop, and that's how I became integrated and a member of hip hop, you know.
And even like as a whole, bro, like what you've been able to accomplish in your career so far, the amount of people you've been able to inspire, like you've shown that it's not only about art, but it's about showing heart. And like you've managed to do that with every album, but it's not just about the music for you, it's always about deeper. And definitely, like, would you just give all the credits to your parents for the start that they give you? Like, what do you give the credit for all of this just ancestral knowledge?
Yeah, my ancestors, you know, the ancestors, everybody who came before me. In my songs, I'm always thinking about the past, but also the future. I'm thinking about the new generations, like what legacy do we have to pass to them? How can we be that vehicle that allows all the ancestral knowledge to be passed to them?
Right.
That's basically what inspires me, you know, being a part of that, continuing that struggle, you know what I mean, and leaving something so that it continues.
Got it.
You know?
I hear you. Well, bro, thank you for coming through. Appreciate you dropping the gems on us. You know what I'm saying?
It's a pleasure.
Yo, for sure.
Develop spiritual health before we're 6 feet deep. Buried beneath, leave a legacy. Something that can outlive we.
Stay woke, no duerman, estudien lo que puedan. Cosecha, learn how to cultivate the weather. Safe better, sun, moon, las estrellas, poinsettia.